we are live.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I want to welcome everyone to the meeting of the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee. It is December 21st, 2020. I am Judy Scanlon, the chair of the committee. And I will have the committee members introduce themselves individually so everybody knows whose face goes with whose name in case you don't know everyone. I'll start with our committee members.
Ed Hafner.
Ed Hafner, yeah.
Judith Bruce.
Oops, sorry.
Judith Bruce.
Rich Levy. Hi, everyone.
Betsy Fertney.
And I see Cecil Newcomb. He is our select board liaison. Welcome, Cecil.
Hello.
The main primary focus of today's meeting is to have a presentation by our consultants on the Crystal Lake Management Plan. I'd like to go right into that and introduce Ed Eichner, who's the principal water scientist from TMDL Solutions, and Dr. Brian Howes. Hi, Brian, who's the director of the Coastal Systems Group at the School for Marine Science and Technology, University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth. Both have been involved with Orleans and our freshwater pond monitoring for 20 plus years, and it all started with Crystal Lake. And I won't delay any further, but to turn this over to our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Now, the question is, how do I get the slideshow up?
Oh, beyond my scope of capabilities. That's a Sarah question.
Yeah, you should be able to just share your screen.
Green.
Upper right.
Yep.
Well, depending on what kind of computer you're using.
Yeah, I have all panelists can share screen. So,
All right. So,
On my computer, it's bottom middle.
yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
can you see that? Can
No,
you see the okay.
if you run your cursor around to the bottom of your screen, that little bar will light up. Within the Zoom US window.
Share screen.
I also see that Walter North has joined us. Scott Fisher, who's the town's consultant for implementation of these management plans. I see Carolyn Kennedy, former chair of this committee. Welcome, all of you. I see Sue now. Apologies to anyone else I may have missed that I don't see.
Now, can you see that?
Yeah.
I can't.
Yep.
All right. Very good. All right. So, after all of that technology, thank you, Judy. Thank you all. I'm going to talk about the management plan and the diagnostic assessment. As Judy mentioned, I'm Ed Eichner, Principal Water Scientist at TMDL Solutions, working with SMAST, and Brian Howes is here from SMAST. Just to start off, why we are where we are. Back in 2017, we went through and we reviewed all of the volunteer water column data monitoring that had gone on for 17 years. We're now up to 20 years. And that basically showed how all of the ponds were impaired. They all had similar data gap needs to put the context to the water quality. So we've got water column data that's been collected by the volunteers, but we sort of need to know what's causing that in the water column. And that's part of what the data gap analysis is, the collection is, and all of that is summarized in a management plan. At that point, there was a decision that was made by this committee to prioritize 4 ponds for these management plans. Uncle Harvey's, Pilgrim, Crystal, and Baker's. And so with Crystal, you will have 3 of the 4 done. So on to Crystal. The draft report goes through and reviews up-to-date information about the water column, water quality data, and then goes through the various data gap surveys that were completed to help understand why we see the concentrations that we see in the water column, and then summarizes all of that information into a water budget, which looks at where all the water comes from that gets into the pond, and then a nutrient budget that looks at where all the nutrients come from that get into the pond. And then we went through and said, okay, is the pond impaired, which it is? And then we looked at management options to get it back to acceptable water quality. So I'm going to run through all of that just to give you an orientation for those of you, I'm sure you all know, this is Crystal Lake on the left side of the screen. It's between Route 28 and Monument Road. It has a stream outflow that goes through a cranberry bog and into Lonnie's or Keskiaugansett. Back in 1946, there were 8 houses near the pond. The upper map is a 1946 U.S. Geological Survey map. The red arrow that's on the northern edge of the pond is a outlet from a cranberry bog that used to exist. That is abandoned. You can still see it today, and that outlet still flows. It's one of the data gaps that we looked at. And then the other lower southern red arrow is the outlet stream that goes through the cranberry bog and then off to Lonnie's or Keskiaugansett. In 2017, we were up to 44 houses within 300 feet of the pond. So in 1946, we had 8. 2017, there are 44. As you might imagine, that's a lot more inputs from those houses. And you can see that in the water quality data that's been collected over the years. This is the long-term clarity, Secchi depth. And this is a significant declining trend from 2000 to 2020 or 2019. And basically it's about 5 inches per year on average that's lost. Not surprising, since Secchi is a measure of clarity, and so typically in Cape Cod ponds, clarity is based on the amount of phytoplankton, which in turn is based on the amount of nutrients that are coming into a pond. We look at the nutrients in the pond and we see upward trends in those. Average shallow total phosphorus has doubled in 20 years. It went past the regional threshold of 10 micrograms per liter in 2011 on average. Total nitrogen, not surprisingly, also has an upward trend. And in large part, that's from septic systems within the watershed. And we'll talk about that in a second. We look at the long-term dissolved oxygen readings, and one of the reasons we focus on dissolved oxygen is it is actually a state numeric standard. So the state has said this is acceptable water quality is above 5 or 6 milligrams per liter, and that's the red line on this graph. So basically on this graph, you see over on the left-hand side is depth. So up at the top is the surface, and down towards the bottom is the deepest portion of the pond. And the across the top is dissolved oxygen concentrations. So the gray line with the blue dots is the spring average dissolved oxygen concentration. You can see that it's pretty much the same through most of the water column until you get down deep close to the sediments where there is oxygen demand that decreases the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water column. But what you also see is that in the spring, on average, dissolved oxygen concentrations are acceptable. They're above the state red line there. In contrast, the summer, on average, you drop down below the state acceptable dissolved oxygen concentration at about 6 meters. So anything deeper than 6 meters, typically during the summer, is below state standards. So all of that gets you to impaired conditions that have gotten worse over time. Part of what we did in terms of looking at the data gap collection was to see what happens during the whole summer. And this is the same sort of setup, but it is the monthly readings that were collected of dissolved oxygen in the upper left-hand corner. You see the red dot, purple line, that's April. Orange is June. The blue, dark blue, is July. The bright green is August. The blue with the red dots is September. And then the sort of lime green is October. So what you see is in April, you see that good dissolved oxygen throughout the water column. By June, you're starting to see the sediment oxygen demand and the bend towards the red line in the deeper waters. In July, you drop down below that state standard. By August, it's well below. In August, it actually below 5 meters depth was below that low dissolved oxygen. It got a little bit worse in September, and then in October, you got a rebound as it starts to mix. Role in what's going on in this pond. So you have sort of a similar sort of thing on the bottom graph. Again, with depth along the left-hand side of the graph. Upper portions of the water column tend to be sort of a straight line. So that's a well-mixed sort of system. You get to around 4 meters or so, and you start to see a transition towards colder temperatures. And then once you get down to around 10 meters or so, it's pretty consistent. This is a stratified kind of setup. The important thing sort of to take home on this is that throughout most of the summer, a good portion of the water column is what the state would classify as a cold water fishery. So this is a system that could support trout year round if there was acceptable dissolved oxygen deep in the water. And so this is 2019. It's sort of what you would see and what you see in the long-term data as well. So it's sort of confirmed what we had seen before. If we start to look at the nutrients, you can see the role of that low oxygen conditions, what it does to phosphorus in particular. The upper left-hand side, this is total phosphorus concentrations. Same colors as we're seeing in the dissolved oxygen. You can see in June, which is the orange, pretty much same dissolved oxygen right on the regional standard, around 10 micrograms per liter throughout the water column. By July, you see a rise in large part facilitated by phosphorus that's coming out of the sediments and mixing into the rest of the water column. And it gets greater and greater as you go through the rest of the summer. When we look and compare and contrast the nitrogen phosphorus, what we see is that ratio. Phosphorus is the key nutrient in terms of managing this system. So any of the water quality problems that we see in the system are largely controlled by phosphorus. Phosphorus, as you might expect, is also driving what's going on with the phytoplankton population. Chlorophyll is a pigment that is a measure of, an indirect measure of how much phytoplankton there is in the water column. Again, throughout the summer, you see this increase that occurs. Concentrations are well above the the Cape Cod regional threshold, which is at 1.7. So you can also see that, not surprisingly, you've got this increase. Your average from 2000 to 2019 was 2.1. In 2019, it was 3.2. So all of that is measures of what's going on in the water of the pond, the water column of the pond. We've got long-term loss of clarity, increase in phosphorus and nitrogen, regular summer loss of oxygen, hypoxia, and in deep waters, anoxia, so essentially no oxygen. Regulatory, not meeting the state standards in terms of dissolved oxygen. Certainly not meeting the state standards, the narrative standards that exist for acceptable water quality. All your concentrations are above the Cape Cod regional thresholds, and 2019 more or less readings sort of confirmed what we're seeing. So all of that takes place in what is the water column. So the question then becomes, why do we see these? What is causing the concentrations that we see in the water? And that's what's addressed through the data gaps surveys. So we went through and we did a whole bunch of different kinds of measures. We looked at the phytoplankton population. We looked at the bathymetry. We looked at freshwater mussels, macrophytes, which are the rooted plants that live in the pond. We measured stormwater discharge. We collected sediment cores to see what sort of conditions phosphorus was released. We looked at the watershed, looked at the land use to figure out how much phosphorus is coming in from the various sources in the watershed. And then we measured stream flow, both the input and the output. And I'm briefly going to go run through all of those.
Ed, would you just explain why it's important to look at the mussels?
I will when I get to that.
All right, thank you.
So we looked at phytoplankton. We collected monthly measurements. These are tows through the water column, through the Secchi portion of the water column. So where we know the light penetrates through. And the take home on this is sort of that blue-greens are the dominant portion. Blue-green cyanobacteria are the dominant portion of the phytoplankton in this pond. This shouldn't be surprising. Most impaired ponds, cyanobacteria are the key. The other take home from this is that the concentrations of the cyanobacteria are relatively low. They're not even close to any of the health standards. Mass DPH, Department of Public Health, has a 70,000 cell per milliliter threshold. As you can see, the highest that we had was 140. So it's obviously a concern because the cyanobacteria are the dominant species, but at this point, not a public health concern. We went through and we did bathymetry. This is thousands of readings, fathometer connected to a GPS as somebody runs around the pond. Anything in the white are the deeper portions. So it scales from the dark blue to the white. When we went through and we did the volume was a little bit less than it had been based on past people going out there and plunking a number of depths. So it's about the same, but it's far more detailed than have been previously available. We went through and we looked at freshwater mussels. Part of the reason that we look at mussels is in a lot of impaired ponds, especially ones that have evidence of phosphorus regeneration, you're probably talking about doing something with the sediments to control that phosphorus release. And so you want to know where the freshwater mussels are, because most of the freshwater mussels that exist in Massachusetts are endangered species. So part of what we do is we go and we take a videotape of every portion of the pond and then go back and review each of the stills from that video to identify where there are freshwater mussels. There were 10 individuals, 10, that were identified in the pond. So there's not a lot of them, but there are some that are in the pond. We looked at rooted plants on the bottom. And in this particular scale, so you go from the darker blue to the white. Darker blue is less coverage, white is 100% coverage of the bottom in terms of density of rooted plants. Most of the rooted plants are along the north and the south shorelines. There is a pocket of them, though, that are in a deep portion of the pond down to the southeast. We double checked and triple checked looking at that, and yes, they are indeed there. They are beyond the Secchi realm, but we do know that Secchi is not the key in terms of how much light penetration there is adequate for plants to grow. There's also a dark, a high density area that's up towards the north. That's a shallow area. You'll also notice that in the western portion over near the boat ramp, there is none. There is no rooted plants that are in this pond. Why we look at this is because this is the plants obviously are a portion of the ecosystem. They have a store of phosphorus that exists within them. There is no sort of management priority for them at this point. They're not really interfering in any way with people's use of the pond or really playing a significant role in what the phosphorus is that's in the water column.
Ed,
We went out and
Ed, could I ask
Pardon?
you one quick question on that slide before
Sure.
you advance? Because you don't have a north axis on there, could you point out where that heavy leaf litter is and why that was important to note, the thick leaf litter along southwest shore?
Yeah, so that's the black area that exists. So if we go from the west over where the boat ramp is, and we head down the main access of the pond, the center access of the pond, to the south, you'll see that black area. That's essentially area that is covered with the leaf litter. So plants really can't grow there, essentially. That's why that area is all black.
And is that
But-
also the area where the sediment cores had the highest level of phosphorus?
No. No, it is not. So sediment cores tended to be, well, let's see if we got, here's where the sediment cores were. You see the red, the
Mhm.
red crosses, those are where the sediment cores are.
Okay.
So onto the sediment cores. Part of the analysis that we did was we collect sediment cores, and then those sediment cores are incubated in such a way that we can measure how much phosphorus they're taking up and under what conditions, once we change the dissolved oxygen characteristics, how much phosphorus is going to come out. What we found was that the cores in general, under aerobic conditions, and those are the blue lines in the graph, retain phosphorus. So they're taking up phosphorus, and this the rates that we saw were consistent with what we saw in terms of the water column. They're taking up about 4 to 5 kilos during the winter time and into the spring before the dissolved oxygen starts to get bad. Once the dissolved oxygen starts to decrease, we have an initial chemical release once they switch over to anaerobic conditions. And then there's a long-term release, which is the gray, the anaerobic release. And more or less, what we saw and measured with the cores matched what we saw in the water column. So we've got this retention during the winter and then release once we get to anaerobic conditions. What is released, the amount that is released, is largely dependent on the depth where the anaerobic conditions occur. So if the anaerobic conditions are higher up in the water column, more sediment is exposed, more phosphorus will be released. We went through and we measured stormwater. Before we started, there were 2 spots that were particularly concerned about direct stormwater discharge. One is what's shown is an outfall pipe that is along Route 28. It's over by the boat ramp. And then there was there's another site on the down gradient side of the pond over by Monument Road. The Monument Road site had some upgrades within the recent past, probably the last 5 years or so. Anytime we went over there and visited during any of the storms that we looked at, there was no discharge that was directly occurring to the pond on that side. So it's Route 28 is the key. There's this outfall pipe. There's a sort of a sediment settling pond that's directly adjacent to it. And then it flows down riprap to the pond. When we looked at that, we collected samples. It's about 1.7 kilos of phosphorus annually that comes out of that system and discharges into the pond. We looked at the watershed. This is the watershed to Crystal. It extends all up into Brewster, up past Cliff Pond. This is the same watershed that is portion of the watershed to Pleasant Bay that was delineated based on U.S. Geological Survey groundwater modeling. So this is consistent with that. Basically, the water flows, a portion of the water that flows out of Cliff flows into Baker, and a portion of the water that flows out of Baker flows into Crystal. We measured stream flow, both inflow and outflow. The inflow is from that historic cranberry bog that's along the northern side. In this graph, it's the red bars. On average, it's about 74 cubic meters per day, but it does have a seasonal aspect. Sometimes it doesn't have any flow, especially during the summer. Stream outflow on average was 625 cubic meters per day, but you can also see that it does have a fluctuation, a seasonal fluctuation, and then it varies from year to year. It likely varies based on groundwater fluctuations. So in high groundwater years, when the pond is high, you're going to tend to have higher amounts of outflow going through that stream outflow. We summarized all of the water in and out of the pond, what's called a water budget. And basically, groundwater is the key, both in terms of what comes into the pond and what goes out of the pond. 79% inflow, 72% outflow is to the groundwater. So basically, any of the what you see in most ponds, larger ponds, at least on the Cape, is that they are a reflection of the groundwater. So what you tend to see in terms of the pond surface is an exposed portion of the groundwater. So there's a depression in the land, groundwater intersects that. And oftentimes when we have a stream outflow, that becomes sort of a short circuit to get the water out of the pond quicker. That was not the case here. The stream outflow was about 21% of the outflow budget. The rest of the outflow is pond water going back into groundwater and flowing downstream. Average residence time, so there's a volume of water in the pond that's based on the bathymetry, is about a year, 0.88 years. So water on average stays in the pond basically about a year. If we look at, then we looked at the watershed and where the phosphorus was coming from. We go through and look at all of the properties that are on the up gradient side. So anything on the left side of the pond in this figure is the up gradient sides. That's where groundwater is coming into the pond. Anything on the right side is pond water flowing back into the groundwater and away from the pond. So on that down gradient side, the only way for water and nutrients to get back into the pond from that side is if you have some sort of conduit. So if you had a stormwater collection and then a discharge through a pipe on the down gradient side, it would flow back into the pond. But otherwise, everything on that side of the pond flows away from the pond. On the other side of the pond, everything that's collected within that portion of the watershed is flowing into the pond. So any water, precipitation that's falling on any of the roads, any wastewater that's being discharged from septic systems, it's flowing into the pond on that side. And when we went through and we looked at phosphorus in particular, we want to look at the age of the houses and the ages of their septic systems. Phosphorus travels really slowly. Groundwater travels a foot per day. Phosphorus travels probably about a tenth of that. So we look at anything that's shown in green, the sort of lime green, all of those houses and the runoff from their roof areas or their driveways, everything from those properties is flowing into the pond at this point. So they're part of what we see in terms of the measures in the water column. Those properties are the ones that are in large part determining what we're seeing. Anything that's in yellow is not contributing phosphorus from septic systems at this point.
So Ed, I'm
Those
sorry.
proper-
I have a quick question. The area hatched that's going to be Meeting House Pond Seward area or planned.
Yep, I'll get there. I'll
Oh.
get there. Give me a
Oh,
chance.
okay. I will, sorry. Go ahead.
So anything that's in yellow, those properties have their roof, the houses are old enough to be contributing roof runoff or driveway runoff to the pond, but their septic systems are too young to have phosphorus coming from the septic systems and getting to the ponds. So that's the distinction between the yellow and the green. Any of the pink properties at this point are undeveloped. So when we talk about management, we're looking at sort of the green properties right now, the yellow properties in the future, and potentially the pink ones if they are ever developed. So to get to the stippled area on the north side, that is the part of the Meeting House Pond sewer area that's in the CWMP. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the management discussions. You can see one of the green properties on the north side that's next to the boat ramp, which is that pink long property that's alongside Crystal Lake in the west corner, is actually already within the Meeting House Pond Seward area. Or
So
Plain
that is,
Seward
but that
areas.
is now the only property of all those others that would be contributing phosphorus to, or nitrogen to Crystal Lake. The others do not, is that correct?
No, that is the only property that, if it is Seward, would be removed from contributing. All of the green properties are currently contributing. So that one is contributing, but then will be removed if you go to Seward Meeting House Pond.
But the other red hatch that are not green, they are not now, nor would they in the future presumably be contributing to Crystal Lake.
No, they are on the down gradient side, so
Okay,
they
thank-
would not. Anything that is on those properties is flowing away from the lake.
Thank you.
So after getting measures of the sediments and measures of what's going on in the watershed and the stormwater, and looking at precipitation, we come up with what is called a phosphorus budget that accounts for all of those and compares the quantity of each of them. In the spring, before the sediments are contributing any additional phosphorus to the water column, wastewater is 66% of the overall phosphorus budget, and what we see in the water column. Road runoff is 22%, with the remainder of the overall budget made up of the roof and precipitation on the pond surface and some stream inflow. So wastewater is the number one. In the summer, wastewater remains the number one, but we have the addition of the sediment regeneration that's going on, which is 27%. That's the other pie over to the right. Road runoff is 16% with the smaller breakdown. So the take home in terms of the budget is that wastewater is the key, both in the spring and in the summer. It's the largest source of phosphorus and largely what determines what we see in the water column. So
I have a
that's
question.
essentially the diagnostic part of the management plan. So we have a sort of an understanding of what's going on with the pond, and we've got impaired water quality. We have septic system wastewater is the largest source of phosphorus. The second largest source is stormwater in the spring. It's the sediments in the summer. The pond could be a cold water fishery if it's restored, and blue greens are the dominant phytoplankton, but concentrations are well below health advisory levels.
Excuse me, Ed. Carol
Yeah.
Etzel had her hand up. I don't know if she needs to ask it now, wants to wait until we get to the comment time. Carol, isn't it? Do you need to, would it
It
help you
would
to?
be helpful now.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Back on your last screen with the the phosphorus budgets. Even though the percentage changes based on the season, is it reasonable to assume that the kilograms per time period are still the same during the summer as during the spring? Because the
Yes.
phosphorus is still traveling at the same rate?
Yes.
So
So
it's still-
basically, you have a consistent source coming with the groundwater. So you've got wastewater, and whatever precipitation is collected in the watershed is constantly coming into the pond. There is going to be a change in the amount of stormwater depending on what's going on with the season. Since we tend to get less precipitation during the summertime, the discharge through that Route 28 is going to be reduced during the summertime, but everything else is pretty consistent. And then once we get to the summer, we add on top of that what's
Okay.
coming out of the sediments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Carol.
All right. So we move then on to the management goals and how to figure out what a plan might be. We have to, there's the addressing the impairments, related to what the Mass DEP water quality standards are. We have the numeric standards, including dissolved oxygen, and then we have the narrative standards. We know that phosphorus management is the key to addressing the impairments. And then we also have this a TMDL issue, which is out there. TMDL stands for total maximum daily load. It's a requirement under the Clean Water Act for any water bodies that the state has classified as impaired. Excuse me. Crystal Lake is currently on the Mass DEP list as an impaired water body. That sort of is a shared state town responsibility to address that, to come up with a TMDL, to move it from impaired conditions to acceptable, meeting the state standards. So those are sort of the goals. In terms of looking at the options, we know that wastewater phosphorus is the key. And when we started to look at the sediment management, because wastewater is such a large portion of the pie, you can deal with the sediments. It will improve the water quality, but it won't get it to the targets and acceptable water quality just on its own. There's got to be some other steps that have to be taken. So we went through, and there you can see in the report, there's a whole bunch of options that were reviewed. We identified those that were applicable. There are certainly the ones related to wastewater phosphorus reductions. And that really is focused on septic systems because they're the source of the wastewater. We also looked at in-pond sediment phosphorus controls, and we looked at aeration and dredging and phosphorus inactivation, largely because it's the same issue that you've seen in some of your other ponds, which is there's phosphorus that's coming out of the sediments when we get the low oxygen conditions. So when we looked at the wastewater, we looked at sewering, and we looked at alternative septic systems. If you do sewering, and this is the discussion before about the Meeting House Pond, the current Meeting House Pond has a sewered area that's identified in the current comprehensive wastewater management plan. In this map, it's the green stippled area. You can see how it wraps around Meeting House Pond, which is over to the right-hand side. As was noted, there's one property that's already in the Crystal Lake watershed that is contributing phosphorus that's also in this area, but they're adjacent to each other. So the question is, how much would it cost? Does the town want to go down this path of sewering the properties that are along the shoreline of Crystal Lake? Mm-hmm. When we did the analysis, it's 13 of the 18 houses. There are currently 18 houses that are contributing phosphorus. If 13 of those were sewered, then you would address the water quality, the phosphorus load that's coming into the pond, and address the water quality problems in Crystal. That doesn't address the 5 additional properties. You know, obviously there'd be some discussion if you ran a sewer line down here. In all likelihood, people on both sides of that line would want to hook up. So you get into questions about how much that would cost, how that would relate to what shows up at the treatment plant, how much, whether you need pump stations, all of the issues that are typically associated with wastewater planning. But if you could do that, you would attain the water quality goals without having to do any sort of in-lake activities.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you would also help lower the nitrogen load to Lonnie's Pond and Pleasant Bay.
That is true too.
Good point, thanks.
If you went down the path of an alternative septic system, there are 2 that are currently approved in the state for phosphorus reduction. This one is a little bit more difficult because both of those at this point are assigned to the piloting category by the state. Piloting, you're limited to the number of systems that you can install. You have to monitor them. The limitation is 15 that can be installed. And so in this particular case, we looked at, you'd have to install these systems on all 18 of the houses that are currently contributing phosphorus. And then you'd have to find some additional phosphorus that would have to be addressed and removed from the watershed. So essentially you'd have to have these alternative systems on all 18 houses and then have to do something with the stormwater that's also in the watershed.
And that's in the whole town? Are you
That,
limited?
this is just in this watershed.
Okay, thank you.
Monitoring is extensive and the costs for monitoring are very steep.
Yes, these are essentially in the state, they're a step beyond experimental. The state has approved them. They want to test them out to see how well they perform in Massachusetts setting. So yes, there would be lots of testing associated with this. It has some issues. The additional issue is that you'd have 5 additional houses that are in the future going to add some phosphorus, and that's probably going to take you over the limit. So you'd have to zero those out somehow as well. So you'd have to have some sort of additional phosphorus removal.
I'm sorry, and Ed, my understanding is that the state does not pay for any of this monitoring. That's on the town or the property owners.
It depends. Piloting systems, it typically is the homeowner or the manufacturer. You know, some towns have gone down this path where they have actually wanted to test out these technologies, so they have paid for the monitoring.
Right, no, I'm saying the property owner or the town, but the state is not paying for these,
No,
for the monitoring.
no,
Okay.
no.
thank
The other issue is that the limitation on the 15 installations. So you conceivably would have to have installations of both types of technologies, which may create some management issues as well. Unless you move as a result, you move from the piloting phase to a general phase, but there's lots of challenges. Let's put it that way.
Ed, when you say 15, were you saying 15 on Cape Cod or 15 in Orleans?
No, I
15 in Massachusetts.
Right, so it's highly unlikely that would happen. And as I understand it, you have to have your old system functioning at the same time the new system is put in, which therefore makes it very difficult for an established house with established landscaping to be able to do both.
You don't have to have it function. You need, if the system fails, you would need to have it replaced with a standard Title V system. So
But you need room, physical space for 2 systems.
you do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or you can tear one out and replace it with there's all sorts of issues associated with piloting. There are lots of hurdles associated. It's given the size of the properties and everything else, for this particular situation for Crystal Lake, this is a really difficult one to sort of endorse.
So it's really not an option.
So sediment, phosphorus reductions, as I mentioned, you need to do something additional, but if you did an aeration or an alum or a dredging, it would improve water quality in the pond because you'd be removing or reducing that phosphorus that's coming out of the sediments. This is a graph that's in the report, in the management plan, that basically does a comparison of, if we start at the top This is the amount of phosphorus that's in the water column. That's across the top of there. And then we have the different options. If we start at the top, we have the current conditions, which are between 13 and 15 kilos in the water column during the summertime. If we removed wastewater from 13 of the 18 current septic systems, we'd get down below this threshold, which was 9.9 kilos. That was established by looking at the water quality and saying, okay, when we have good water quality conditions, typically during the springtime or such, how much phosphorus is there in the water column? And so that's the 9.9. If we remove that second one, if we remove 13 of the 18, we get down below that line. If we do the phosphorus removing septic systems and add an additional 0.65 phosphorus removed, we also get below that line. If we do alum and it's a medium performance level, which is 59% phosphorus removal from the water column, we get an improvement from where we are right now during the summer, but we don't get to that line. The same thing for hypolimnitic aeration. If we get to a high level of performance, which is about 80% removal, we also see an improvement, but again, don't get down to that line. Dredging, same sort of thing. If we do a median alum treatment with stormwater removal, we're bracketed right around that line. Aeration, same sort of thing with the stormwater removal. So essentially you do something in the pond and you remove some phosphorus from the watershed. If you get a high level of performance, and this is the last section down at the bottom, if you get a high level of performance out of the alum or the aeration with some removal from of the stormwater, you get down below the line. So at this point, it sort of is this decision about whether you want to go down this path of doing something to just address the sediments, or if you want more of a permanent sort of solution by dealing with what's in the watershed. Our suggestion that's in the plan is that you move towards doing something about what's going in the watershed. But you consider, depending on what the timing is of getting to that point of doing something about the watershed, doing something in the pond, because it's going to have some sort of improvement. So that's where we are right now, in terms of coming to you and seeking what you think in terms of feedback, what you as a committee sort of want to do. We've made our recommendation about the way to go forward with this. One other issue is about the TMDL designation is, our recommendation is that you do not go into that world unless you need to. Unless somebody comes to you and says you needed to develop a TMDL at this point. Our suggestion is come up with a strategy, figure out the improvements, see if you can get to acceptable water quality, and then file for the TMDL and say, this is what we did and we have acceptable water quality. We are all set.
Ed,
So
Could I ask a
I
quick
guess
question?
that's essentially it. So any questions you got, go ahead.
Well,
Thank you, Ed.
just stepping back to those options, was there any consideration given to a PRB along 28 to catch maybe half a dozen of the properties right within Route 28?
We did not look at the PRB thing. That would require a lot of disturbance along the shoreline, probably.
No, I mean in the road. They're proposing to do these in Orleans within our road system. So you'd
Yeah,
only
but
be
that would
catching.
Yeah, but
That would be
here,
for nitrogen. That doesn't take care of phosphorus.
Oh, thank you.
PRB that the town
Yep,
is
thank you,
ignoring
thank
is
you. Yep,
nitrogen only.
yep, got it.
if you did it along the road, you'd be missing a whole lot of the properties. If you can see, there's a lot of properties that are on, past the road. They're adjacent to the pond. So you'd have to actually, if you were going to do a PRB, you'd have to actually do it along the shoreline.
Yeah, but Judith is right. That's nitrogen. It would
No,
help, but
you can do, Betsy, you can do a PRB for iron. We did one at Ashumet Pond that worked. It's worked these 20 years now.
For phosphorus, yeah, it was iron.
Yeah.
oh, well
But
then
the
maybe it
problem-
is because,
Well, there's a problem, and that is that if you're too close to the pond shore, then sometimes you get oxidized iron seepage out, and you get a red staining of the shoreline, and people don't like that.
I've
Well,
seen that photo.
And
Well,
Yeah,
that's not ours, that's somebody else's in Wacoit, but the one in Ashumet had a little bit of that too, but it was buried deeper.
but if you go back to those residences, you can see that the long strand of the long pink strand, which is town owned. I don't know, I guess if people were upset about red staining, I mean, everything is a trade-off, right? I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd be picking up 4 immediately and a potential 5th or even 6th. 1, 2, 3.
So
4.
Betsy, but even this, even if you did that, you're only if our threshold is you got to have 13 that you take out, you really have to disturb a whole lot of the shoreline in order to address 13.
And
Again, I thought they were doing them within the road, not along the shoreline.
but I don't think.
Well,
you can do-
that's what I'm saying. If you did it along the road, you're not picking up 13, so you'd have to go along the shoreline.
But you'd be picking up 7, and you could likely do that at the same time that you fix the Route 28 drainage, because it's in that same pocket. So if you combine the stormwater correction.
It wouldn't,
plus-
Betsy, it wouldn't work.
Okay.
You'd
Well,
be
let's put-
closer. You'd have an improvement. There's no question you would have an improvement. However, there would be challenges with putting in the iron screening deep enough, given the elevations too.
Right.
You'd probably be better off doing it along the shoreline.
And the ones that they're proposing are liquid injection PRBs, and those are just for nitrogen. They don't.
Well, yeah, the ones that are currently used in the town, that is definitely for nitrogen.
So I think at Ashumet I think that the PRB for phosphorus at Ashumet was perfect, and it was almost the only answer, because you had that huge plume coming from Mass Military Reservation that was already in the ground, and it had to be stopped.
Right.
But I think, and I'm really not up on all the costs and all of the technology with this, but I think that was extraordinarily complex and very costly to put that in.
Well,
I think it was a great investment, but I don't know that would work at all for looking at Crystal Lake.
I don't think that exact PRB would be good for Crystal Lake. I will tell you that it actually was a very much cheaper solution than you can imagine, because it was not injected. The trenches were not built. What happened was just this top with just this front end loader, the surface was scraped off, 0 valent iron was mixed in, and the surface was replaced with a bobcat kind of thing. So it wasn't like big trenches.
Oh, interesting.
And it has worked quite well these many years, I'm happy to say.
Yeah.
But I don't think Crystal Lake, that would not be a problem. People are not going to want you digging up, the whole shoreline. Plus there's a permitting issue and all of that. The one thing for this, and I'm not pushing in any direction, I like you could go with the IA systems, different type, whatever, but there is in the calculus has to be phosphorus plus nitrogen if you can extend the sewer, that you're helping to solve the Lonnie's Pond, the river type nitrogen overloading, at the same time you're solving the Crystal Lake phosphorus overloading. So it's one of the few times we get a twofer.
So
And
that's
don't-
why the red hatched parcels on Crystal Lake, that was primarily for nitrogen prevention to Meeting House Pond.
That was the goal, yes.
So do we have any idea why they didn't? I mean, we're talking another 20 or 30 parcels. Any knowledge of why we didn't just come down Route 28 another?
Be-
I don't think that was necessarily the consideration. The focus
Betsy-
really was on the Meeting House Pond, and that is the Meeting House Pond watershed.
Okay,
Is that figure.
Betsy, our committee will, when
That
this
one.
is finalized, we will submit recommendations to the Water and Sewer Board and Select Board. So that would be the time that we would consider things like this.
well, I must confess, and I'm going to use this as an example. If we extend it in this direction, that's what, another 30 parcels or so to pick up those upgradients, and granted, it also adds to the nitrogen. But it's very interesting that we proposed that for Uncle Harvey's Pond, which was 5 upgradient houses. And if I believe the Cape Codder article that was recently published, they're showing the addition of 147 parcels at a cost of some 4 or 5 million. So I'm just confused on these septic and sewer extension costs, how we look at the numbers that are in Ed's report versus some of the numbers we're seeing published for what was supposed to be a minor pickup at Uncle Harvey's Pond.
So I did question that, Betsy, and I understand that just the fix, if you will, for Uncle Harvey's was presented. For whatever reason, that wasn't what Rich Eldred picked up and put in the paper. He put in, there were a couple of alternatives, options that were presented at the meeting to the select board. One of them was to pick up additional properties to help protect the upper reaches of Pleasant Bay. The way, when you read the article, it did sound like you had to pick up 146 properties to protect Uncle Harvey's. That was not what was proposed to the select board. So I won't say it was an erroneous reporting. I think it was just an attempt to report something less. And unfortunately, in so doing, it gave a sort of misleading information to the public. I've suggested to them that they really need to correct that so that people don't think that to.
Thank you,
include
Judith.
Uncle Harvey
I'll go back to the original meeting and listen to the original. Thank you.
Yeah,
at
and,
the
and
select board meeting.
Betsy,
I'm-
at the time, our committee was asked for a recommendation regarding the upgradient houses at Uncle Harvey's Pond and the timing. It came before town meeting when funding is voted on by the citizens. So that is another factor, is you have to time it and put our recommendations out there, and then it has to be taken up by the Water and Sewer Board and Select Board and go through a process of consideration and an approval for funds.
But frankly, if that has to be done by May of this year, the decisions on Crystal Pilgrim and Uncle Harvey's Pond in terms of sewering need to be moving extremely fast.
Yes.
Yes. Agreed.
So we'll get our recommendations out there as quick as we can following the finalization of this report.
So I'm sorry, Judy, I do have a couple of questions.
Okay, I cannot see you guys raising hands because Ed's graphic takes up my screen. So I apologize if other people have their hands up. Until you talk, I can't even see you.
Perhaps
you want
we
me
should
to-
go back
do you
to
want
the
me to stop?
screen.
I have a.
You want me to
question
stop?
also.
I think the screen is good
Yes.
and maybe we can use raise hand. Will that? I don't even see raise hand. No, I've
Where's
lost
that?
I
love
can't find
raised
that.
hand.
There's someplace.
It's
I
usually
have
down there. I don't.
chat, But I don't see a raised hand.
I don't see it anymore either. I used
You'll
to-
find raised hand if you go into the click participants, and raised hand should show up on the bottom right-hand side of that screen.
Aha.
Thanks, Walter.
Do you want me to turn off the slideshow?
No, I think it's helpful.
Okay.
It is.
for,
I
um,
just blind, that's all.
so-
I'm sorry.
So
I
my,
I
my
do see a
question-
ton of hands now. I see Carol, Scott Fisher, and Judith, and now I see Sue Sargent with hands up. So I would like to have committee members comment first, and then we'll go open it up to everybody.
so may I go?
Yes.
Okay, so I would love to see the stormwater to Crystal fixed and repaired, but I think I need to point out that that is Mass DOT, and they've basically told us that they're going to get to it when they get to it. And I think they will get to it. I mean, we had this, Conservation Commission had this battle with them over 10 years ago for Route 6, and it took them some 8 years to get to it. They got to it, so I'm sure they will. but it's going to be on their schedule. It's not going to be on ours. And witness the fact that our own DPW, let's give them a big hand. They took care of the problem on Monument, but we don't have the same control over the stormwater intrusions on 28. So while we can hope for it, I don't think we can count on it. I would personally very much like to see that whole strip of properties included in the sewer plan. I think it makes sense. I like getting a twofer that will also protect the river and Lonnie's, along with our freshwater pond. And another concern, just in terms of PRB versus sewering, when we're talking about nitrogen, it's my understanding that when we're looking at cyanobacterias, the nitrogen to phosphorus ratio matters. And if we reduce the nitrogen inputs to Crystal and don't reduce the phosphorus at the same time, we actually would be encouraging cyanobacteria growth in that pond. I don't know that it works the other way if we only remove phosphorus inputs without doing nitrogen, that there's any kind of issue there.
Judith, if I could respond, if you decrease the amount of phosphorus that's in this pond, you're going to change the phytoplankton mix. So you're probably going to get into a situation where cyanobacteria are not the favored phytoplankton in this pond.
I think that's what I'm saying, Ed. There was at one point a plan that perhaps instead of doing sewering along 28 for nitrogen, the town would do a PRB. The PRB would only reduce the nitrogen. It would have no impact or effect on the phosphorus levels going into the pond. So if by selecting a PRB for nitrogen control instead of sewering for nitrogen control, without decreasing phosphorus, we would be changing the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus, which I think is something we don't want to do.
Well, you'd be changing it the wrong way. That's the
Exactly.
way to say.
That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm doing a terrible job of trying to say. Thank you.
No, I thought you're great. I'm not worried about that. But it's a tough thing because it's the whole problem of only trying to manage one thing. And that's why I came to this meeting today with the hope that we could get you to think about the freshwater and the saltwater systems that are inextricably linked in this particular case.
Right.
I think you've totally grasped that completely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brian.
I see all kinds of hands up. I'm not sure if they're old hands or new hands. I see that Ed Hafner has a hand signal. Is that true, Ed?
Yes, yes, thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the red hatched area on the north side of Crystal, where Ed, you mentioned that it was not really contributing much phosphorus to Crystal Lake, but isn't it possible that there is some contribution that the phosphorus would, by diffusion, somehow get into Crystal, if not by the flow? So it may not be correct to say that it's totally not adding phosphorus to the Crystal Lake. It just may be a minimal amount, but there may be some amount that's coming in from there. Would you like to comment on that?
If we go back to the one that has the red hatching on it, basically anything, there is one property that is under the red hatching that is green in that figure, that is currently contributing phosphorus to Crystal Lake. Anything that is other than that property is outside of the watershed or on the down gradient side of the pond. So the water in Crystal Lake is flowing back into the groundwater and away from the pond on any of those properties. The only way that any phosphorus that would get back into the pond from those properties is if there was some sort of overland flow, either stormwater or something running across the yard, sheet flow of that sort. In most of those cases, that's really minimal contribution, not something really worth talking about. The only thing that actually is on that side that is currently contributing phosphorus is that old historic abandoned cranberry bog. And that's through that stream, which we actually measured.
And it's small.
Thank you.
And that stream is also controlled by the bog manager at times.
Hey, Ron.
Okay.
I see other hands. None of your hands
All right,
disappears.
you're welcome.
I've got a question.
I see Carol. That's Carol, right?
Yep.
Okay, Carol.
Okay. Given that phosphorus travels through the groundwater at some rate close to an inch a year, if all those green properties are sewered, how long will it take to reach the TMDL, the ideal TMDL level of 9.9?
Well, that's a very good question that I cannot answer accurately. But once the phosphorus, once a septic system, once those properties were connected up to a sewer, let's say, then you wouldn't have water going through the septic system leach field anymore.
Oh, okay.
You would remove a phosphorus source. And typically the way phosphorus moves through the groundwater, through the sediments in the groundwater, is that there is some phosphorus. The phosphorus uses up, it binds with iron that's on the sand particles. And that binding is pretty solid. It becomes a solid actually. And so it doesn't, that binding site is used up. So the next phosphorus that comes along passes by that binding site and binds with the next binding site, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually you're going to get breakthrough of the phosphorus because it's exhausted all of the binding sites. That's what's happening on all of these green properties. So once you remove the phosphorus source that's going along that flow path, the only way that you're going to get additional phosphorus is if those binding sites release. If that helps.
So you're saying immediately it would stop?
Well, it would take some time because you're going to have some transit, that some amount that's moving along with the groundwater. I would say a good sort of rule of thumb is probably you're going to reach a new equilibrium within, let's say, 5 years or so.
Okay. So the old binding sites aren't going to release and be clean enough for new phosphorus to bind. Everything that's in the groundwater now is going to just keep on going, but at a slower rate because there's no pressure from more leach water coming through.
Very good. Excellent. Yes.
Okay, thank you. If anybody has a hand up sign that it isn't a real one, please take it down so I can try to track who's got questions. Betsy Fertney, you still have a hand sign, okay, up. Do you have an additional?
I do. And I had the same question Carol had, and it's been partially answered. So now I can put dates to it. So if the extension for Crystal Lake was completed as per the Meeting House Pond plan by fall of 2024, correct? 2024, and we add 5 years to that, it would be 2029 before we're really shutting the phosphorus off of the system, which then to me would argue for doing some sort of interim remediation. And I fully understand that UMass DOT is in control, but this is their great pond and it's on their impairment list. I think we aggressively need to pursue DOT and have a liaison and have a monthly meeting. We need to really push on this stormwater component, because if we have to wait till 2029 for the sewers to work, we
Right.
shouldn't be sitting on our arster during that period of time.
Yeah, I have to add to that, though. Ed, when he said 5 years was, I think is being cautious. But since he
okay.
gave the talk and I didn't, I can actually not be cautious. I would think that once you flush the groundwater through this system, which it's all within a relatively quick travel time, that probably will start seeing significant drops, and then it'll drop off. The improvement will be quicker and then slower and slower over time. But I'm thinking that a year or two, I'm not thinking 5 years to start seeing any big improvement, because the phosphorus that's bound to the sites, as soon as you start stop dumping stuff in, the other changes that occur in the aquifer once you shut off the wastewater flow will actually enhance the retention of phosphorus that is already stuck on. In other
Okay,
words, it
well,
won't
that's
get worse, it'll get better.
right, but that's really critical in
Very good.
considering an interim decision. And I'm
Right.
also confused, since this is a Great Pond and it's owned by the state of Massachusetts, where is our funding for our Great Pond?
Yeah, well, they own it, you pay for it, I think, is what in my town it goes. That's how it is for me.
But
Uh,
is that the way it is? It just seems,
I think we try to change those things, and we are trying to change them, but what the towns have done is have stepped up and said, we can't wait for all this. You know, these ponds are getting bad, and I think there is some money around, but it's hard to get, you know.
Yeah,
but
it's essentially the same discussion that's going on with the nitrogen for the estuaries. That's a town, it's a town responsibility to figure out a strategy and implement it.
okay, but then we have a bigger problem, which is we know pretty much all of our lakes are in this situation.
Yeah,
And how do we move this forward, showing it just like a pavement plan? How do we show the capital required over the next 20 years to be fixing this and raise its visibility? I see money, I go to town meeting and I see money going out here and money going out there. This, to me, water quality just seems to me to be the biggest priority for tourism, for health, for so many reasons. I just don't know how we can get this elevated and get this front and center and get moving. I mean, everyone knows my frustration. We've made a recommendation 3 years ago on Uncle Harvey's Pond, and here we sit. So how do we elevate this?
So this is us.
Betsy, that is the crux of the question, and it's always the challenge. And I think you just have to keep punching at it. That's all.
Green.
I would recommend that you don't wait for the grand plan, that you work on the grand plan and you knock these smaller things off. I mean, when you think of how many hundreds of homes Orleans is sewering, and we're talking about 18 and 5 for Uncle Harvey's, that's 23 out of how many are you going to sewer in your sewer plan? It's money. I mean, it's real money, but that's the issue. And I think that try to chip the little ones off as you can. Crystal Lake's a big pond. It's 39 acres.
Right.
It's a jewel. I mean, we absolutely need the protection sooner rather than later.
Right, and Pilgrim Lake is in proximity also. I want to make sure I get to everyone. Ed Hafner still has a hand signal up. Is that a new question, Ed?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Can I ask it now?
yes, I'm just trying to do it committee members, but I am also aware that Sue Sargent has a hand up and Scott Fisher. So I want to get to everybody once the committee members are done asking.
All right. With regard to the TMDL, Ed, you suggested trying to avoid it, but wouldn't it be better to embrace it? And then that could be a source of pressure to get some of these things done, like the stormwater runoff treatment and other things?
It's a question of where you embrace it. I think on the local level, I would definitely embrace it. On the state level, I would avoid it. I don't know that there's necessarily any advantage, disadvantage one way or the other at the state level. You're already on the list as an impaired water quality body. So
I was
think
I was
that's a-
thinking
that
in
makes a
terms
low-
of getting the,
Pardon,
sorry.
I missed you.
sorry, I was thinking in terms of getting the, the people who would treat the stormwater, construction. If we had state pressure or federal pressure, even with the Clean Water Act, that might encourage them to act faster.
Well, I guess I'm sort of in Judith's camp on this. Our past dealings with DOT is they'll do it when they're ready to do it.
And it's
But they
different.
don't,
It's different
no way to
agencies.
pressure them.
It's different agencies and they will not feel pressured by a different agency within the Mass government, is my experience.
Hmm.
Plus, that is an extraordinarily complex system that we are asking them to fix. They attempted it several years ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of work was done, but it is a huge system that goes all the way up Finley Road into the White Cedar Swamp that's wedged between the lake and Finley, across the street into an old cranberry bog, picking up sections and intersection of Route 28. It's enormous. It's going to be a massive project. And I agree. If we can get somewhere with them, great. I just don't think it's worth a lot of energy or resources because the payback's going to be little compared to what we can get done locally. And in terms of speed, having worked on this for 20 years, wow, Orleans is moving like lightning now, guys. Give thanks. Man.
Yeah, thank you. Betsy, is this a new question or is that just?
A new, yeah, one, but it's quick. I just need clarification of this state impaired list. What are the dates that Uncle Harvey's, Pilgrim, and Crystal first appeared on that list?
That would take some digging around, Betsy, to find out. I
Pilgrim
don't
right
know
now
for
is
sure.
not on the list.
I think Betsy, actually, I think I looked at that for Uncle Harvey's when I did that. Uncle Harvey's, I think, was a relatively recent addition.
Yeah, was.
I don't know the other ones. I don't know when they came on. I would imagine Crystal probably came on, was on the list during the initial creation of the list, which I think was 2004. Yeah, something like that. It's been
Okay.
they're supposed to do it every 2 years, and they just finished approving this year the 2016 list, I think. So there is no 2018 list or 2020 list at this point. I don't know if they're going to go back and do a 2018 or what their plan is at this point.
And Uncle Harvey's must have been 2014, and then Crystal was original, and then Pilgrim is recommended but not yet on. I just see this as one more tool in communicating to the select board and the public how long-standing this is, how it flows into our Clean Waters Act. In other words, get it out of the small picture and move it into a bigger picture.
Absolutely. I mean, it is part of, as you're moving forward, and what we have seen in some of the other communities on the Cape is they have elevated the ponds into the discussion of the CWMPs, in large part because it is the same picture. It is the same Clean Water Act. It is the same TMDL problems.
Thank you.
So at our next meeting next month, we should discuss what recommendations our committee might want to put forward and then draw up a formal document with these recommendations. So we can talk about that next month.
But including Pilgrim Lake, because we never did that for Pilgrim Lake.
Right. And there was some discussion at one point about, handling both of those lakes together. We should discuss that also. I do see now two people. I'm going to open it up if it's okay with the committee to other participants. That doesn't mean you can't still ask questions, committee members, but I do still see Scott Fisher and Sue Sargent. I'm going to ask Scott first. He's a consultant that deals with the implementation of these management plans. And then I'll go to Sue Sargent, who is one of the co-presidents of Friends of Crystal Lake. Scott?
Thanks, Judy, and thanks, Ed and Brian. Great information, really helpful. A lot of the questions I have.
We
have
can
actually-
set it up today.
Just tell me when, I'll be down here to meet you.
All right, I'll let you know when marine and freshwater are done.
Just email
Sarah,
me
you've
or
taken
call me.
control of our,
Sorry about that. So a lot
No,
of my questions have actually been answered in the time I've been waiting. So great questions asked by the committee. One question, these are somewhat all over the place and not necessarily related. One question I was wondering, in the previous reports you've submitted, there's a lot of discussion about external loading versus internal loading. The external loading source had typically always been septic systems, and internal had been sediment that contributes. It appears that that information is the same here. I'm just wondering if, let's say, Ed and Brian, if we move forward with sewering all those properties as what's being discussed here today, will the internal sediment loading not be a problem over time, and will that still basically be maintained? Would that be not necessarily a silver bullet, but would that help us keep within those parameters that you've identified as the target of 9.9?
Yeah, the sediments are a response system. So what you see coming out of the sediments is what went into the pond from the watershed over time. And so once you lower what goes in, then eventually it'll calm down and re-equilibrate to a lower flux from the sediments. But most importantly, if you lower what comes in from the watershed, since that's the dominant summertime load, and the sediments are only 27% in the summer, the phosphorus concentrations in the lake in the summer should be lower, the phytoplankton production should be lower, and the amount of oxygen uptake should be lower, and so you should have more oxygen. Once you trigger oxygenated bottom waters, then the flux from the sediments becomes quite small in this lake. So the trick is to get the bottom waters oxic, and you can do that by lowering the phosphorus. You can do that by adding alum. You can do that by adding oxygen itself.
All right, thanks, Brian. And my other question, it's been alluded to many times, is regarding stormwater. So your slide explained, I think it was throwing this out there, I think it was 28% of phosphorus loading was contributed by stormwater. I know that this has been pointed out to be a Mass DOT responsibility. I think it was Judith who mentioned that they've attempted at it and it's been very complicated, and it sounds complicated. You know, so I'm just curious though, in your slide where you had, I forget which one it was, I think it's several slides forward from where you're at right now, you had that equilibrium point or the goal of 9.9, and you showed all the different methods that was proposed on it. Keep going.
There.
That one there. I didn't
Yep.
see an option of just stormwater improvement by itself. All of the stormwater removal options are in tandem with either alum or aeration improvements.
Right.
I know it could be a complex issue, and that's possibly why you didn't investigate it, because just, you know, the sands of time here when it comes to DOT. But did you run that model just to see what would happen if the stormwater system was upgraded and there wasn't the phosphorus addition?
Well, it goes back to this question of the budget. You could have this improvement in the phosphorus from the stormwater. You could remove the stormwater phosphorus. You still don't get into the realm of getting down to the level of what you need in terms of the target, because it's a relatively small amount of the overall water column phosphorus. So you just not get, you probably, I'm trying to remember what it is. I want to say it's like 2 kilos total.
1.7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not very much.
All right. So because I think the chart, the pie graph chart you were just at, it had it at 28%, which obviously is not, there's 27%, forgive me, which is not the same as wastewater at 48%, but it is, you know, considerable. So actually, I'm sorry, 22% in spring, 16% in the summer. It is a piece. And I'm just wondering, you know, okay, so say a sewer system goes into place, right? So that is improved. So you're improving the spring phosphorus budget and the summer phosphorus budget. However, you still, and I know what Brian said about the sediments, so that would be eliminated. You still have stormwater contribution though, that is contributing 22% in the spring and 16% in the summer. But you believe based on the removal, well, first of all, as Brian explained, you'd have a sediment improvement in terms of phosphorus in lake contribution, and then you'd have the septic system improvement. You don't believe that what remains as an internal source would contribute problems that the committee should be concerned with after that point.
It would not create problems. Let's put it that way. You want to have some phosphorus in the pond.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
sure.
you're not going to have any fish. So you want to have it. The key is about having the balance. And so this water column target, the 9.9, that's still an amount of phosphorus that's in the pond. You don't want to get too far south of that. Otherwise, you're going to eliminate the possibility you're going to even have fish in the pond. So maybe I'm missing the point, but if you tackle the septic system, the wastewater phosphorus, you're going to get to a point where you should have acceptable water quality in the pond.
Right. Now, I was just more looking at all the options since, you know, these are all complex by themselves. So usually the committee, you know, likes to look at all the different options there, understand what, you know, goals are going to be, you know, reached at, and understand where they'll be at if they implement different ideas. That was sort of the point was, you know, if you know, sewering is not an option, what are the other options that are out there? And what is the, you know, how would we get to that threshold target? But I do understand what you're saying in terms of it's important to have phosphorus obviously within a system, and that the 9.9 is keeping it at that point where I think would be most desired. So I appreciate that. When you mentioned the freshwater mussel discussion before and how several individuals were identified, were they identified to species, and do we know that those are rare freshwater mussels as listed by Massachusetts, or are they just freshwater mussels, period?
They're just mussels, period. We did not speciate them.
In order to
Okay.
speciate a lot of them, you have to kill them. You can't do it just by looking at external shell morphology. You actually have to cut them open. And you know, 10,000 a cut, we figured that wasn't worth it. That's a joke. No,
Well,
Fine.
that's not necessarily true. We do have freshwater biologists, mussel biologists who go in and routinely identify the species by the outside of the shell, and they do a lot of relocations. So
But when we
it is
did
possible.
we did a Schumann's mussels, and we work with Natural Heritage, they did not want us picking up the mussels, and we could not get to species. We get to genus, we couldn't get to species all the time.
Do we know if this pond has it been identified to have state listed species
Don't know.
in it?
No.
Okay.
It has other ones. It's a Plymouth gentian habitat. So there are some other ones that are part of the National Heritage.
But
Okay.
on the stormwater thing, Scott, the stormwater, there's a lot of reasons to get rid of stormwater, not just phosphorus. So it's generally, you know, you can cut down on bacterial contaminations, metals, oil, all that other stuff. So I think that continuing pressure on DOT, town doesn't have to pay for it, to get rid of that source would be a really positive thing for the pond.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, and I think it was mentioned before, is I think this stormwater system that is discharging through this pipe is a really complex system that is linked in part to what's going on in that wetland that's on the other side of Route 28 as well. At least from the indication of being out there, when the stormwater starts to percolate through that pipe and you get the flush of hydrogen sulfide, I'm thinking that's probably linked in a lot of ways to what's going on up there too. So it's definitely something that's going to require some significant effort to figure out how to redesign what the collection area is and what's actually being feeding into that system.
Okay, that's all I had, Judy. Thank you both for your time today.
Okay, I thank you, Scott. Betsy, I know you have your hand up, but can we get to Sue Sargent, who's been very patient?
Well, it had to do with Scott's question, so it's just
Okay, all right.
tag
go-
along to that, which
Okay.
is, I don't think that Ed clarified for Scott that the percentage of regenerated phosphorus is significantly different between the three ponds. So talking about ignoring internal regeneration of phosphorus in Uncle Harvey's pond would have a significantly different impact than ignoring the internal regeneration of phosphorus within the Pilgrim Lake because of the significant percentage differences between them.
That is true. The Uncle Harvey's is a different animal because the phosphorus budget is, the sediments are the biggest part of the phosphorus budget in Uncle Harvey's, as opposed to Pilgrim and Crystal, where the septic watershed is, wastewater is the largest percentage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask Sue, Sarah, there are two people listed as out there just as attendees. Is there a way to make it so they can ask questions if they have them? Or do they?
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
can allow them to talk.
I don't know if they have questions, but I'd like to give them that opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they can use the raise hand feature if they
okay.
want to talk.
Okay, Sue, you have a question?
Well, first of all, I have a huge thank you to all of you. I'm not a scientist, but I've been trying to follow all the work you've done, and I just can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. I have been on Crystal Lake with my family since 1956 as a summer resident, and then for 20 years now as full-time. This lake is my heart. So really, I cannot thank you enough. My question is, if I understand what you're saying, sewering really is the answer. Would you be proposing sewers to come down Crystal Lake Drive or just 28?
I think they need to come down Crystal Lake Drive too. I mean,
Yeah.
they need to pick up basically anything that's in green. And if you're running that line down there, you
Yeah.
probably want to pick up all the yellow properties as well.
And now the white properties, our house happens to be the first one that's in the white zone. That means we would not be part of the loading?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for your question, Sue. I actually had a question, Ed, with regard to the figure that is up there right now, the yellow properties. I'm not positive, but I think that one of those properties had cesspools prior to the septic system that hasn't the phosphorus hasn't reached the lake yet.
Yep.
Did you look at that also? Like the
Yeah,
impact of
no,
whatever.
absolutely. All of these, I went through the Board of Health records for each of these properties. So as it says on the figure, average age of the houses is 52 years. Average age
Right.
of the septic system leach fields is 28. So for those 20 years prior to the septic system that they have right now, they had something that was probably, in a lot of cases, was a cesspool.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this sort of gets back to that question of phosphorus moving towards the pond. If you had the cesspool, you had the phosphorus source, and then you had a new septic system put in with a new leach field that was in a different groundwater flow path.
Okay.
So the phosphorus is actually going past new binding sites so that you have a while before that phosphorus plume reaches the pond. So almost all of these properties, including the ones that are in green, had cesspools at some point.
Okay. I remember doing a sanitary survey with Carolyn Kennedy way back when, and there were at the time 13 cesspools within 300 feet of Crystal Lake.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
memories.
no, I mean, most, if you go through the Board of Health records, you'll see the progression is, it was a cesspool. It was a number of cesspools after the first one failed. And then they moved into a leach field.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. I see Sue's hand up again, or she just didn't cancel it?
No, no, I'll see if I can take it down.
Oh, okay. I just don't want to miss anybody.
No,
If
thank you.
somebody out there that still has a question and it didn't get a chance to answer it. Do the committee members have any more questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, I will ask you for any additional questions or comments. You know, if you could send me any written ones that come up. I do see you, Judith, just a sec. Any additional comments or questions, if you could send them, written ones, I can get them to Ed and Brian before they finalize the report. And I do thank you for all your comments so far. Judith, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Judy. I just wanted to thank Brian and Ed. This was really helpful and very enlightening. And also for the committee, I really feel so strongly that our recommendation to the select board should be that they immediately look to investigate putting Crystal and Pilgrim to these properties, putting it onto the sewering system, not only for what it will do for these two freshwater properties, but also we already know that at Lonnie's Pond, we need to do more than just oysters. The oysters have been fabulous, and bless their tasty little hearts, they have been working very hard and doing a great job, but it's not enough. So before we start looking into things like alternative septics that are going to cost a great deal of money to monitor to augment Lonnie's Pond, I think it makes sense to look at sewering these properties that can give us a two for the cost of one bang.
Thank you, Judith. And Betsy, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a final comment. In terms of the total report, just a suggestion that there is so much information on so many different things that somehow they kind of all assume the same weight. So using the alternative septic systems as an example, we've just talked about the fact that there's so many reasons why they're not a really big factor. It's really not in play here in terms of an immediate decision. And yet with the space in the report devoted to it, it looks like it's a real and it's a right now thing. So I just think as you look through this report, you need to highlight the things that are reasonable to be doing right now, and perhaps a little less space devoted to those things, which are very interesting. I mean, I love reading about the phosphorid and know that maybe 10 years down the road that's coming, but just balance it a little bit more in terms of the here and now.
Well,
Thank you.
if I could respond, Betsy,
Yep.
one of the things that I'd like feedback from the committee when you're thinking about this is we want this management plan to reflect what you really want in terms of your goals for this pond. If you feel really strongly about a particular approach, we can punch that up and make that the main goal of the way you want to do things. If you want to push sewering, we'll put that in as the preferred goal of the committee.
Yeah.
So
I think that would be really helpful, because I kind of think that's what was missing in one of the prior reports. It just didn't emphasize the conclusions that had been reached. So I think perhaps Judy at our next meeting can lead us to that focus, sharpen it up so that it really focuses on the sewering and the rationale and the longer term goals and how it also contributes to nitrogen. So I very much would like to tilt it closer towards what we feel is realistic right here and now.
Okay, I don't know if the committee wants to actually, everybody wants to voice an opinion at this stage, or whether you want to discuss it some more at our next meeting. I certainly have an opinion right now, but I don't know if everyone else does.
I think
But
it would be a good agenda item,
Well,
certainly.
it's going to be on the agenda where we want to finalize our recommendations or, determine what they're going to be. I know personally that, I think sewering offers the best opportunity to eliminate phosphorus. So that would be certainly my personal opinion. I see Judith has a hand up.
I'm sorry to keep opening my mouth. I'm trying to be quiet, but it never works.
Forget it, Judith, forget it. Just speak.
It doesn't work. So, but for Brian and Ed, it just occurred to me, Mike Diggy's been doing some really interesting work for the Pleasant Bay Alliance, pricing out the cost per pound of nitrogen removed with the various approaches. And I'm wondering if it's possible to do something similar to that for this. And I know this then becomes extraordinarily complex, but looking at a cost benefit of in terms of what this does for Crystal Lake as well as Lonnie's Pond, if there isn't a way to sort of put it together and look at it in a totality so that we can really see what those comparable costs are.
I think that would be a helpful perspective to broaden it out.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I want to really focus in on, I think you really want to focus in this on Crystal Lake. We can talk about bringing Lonnie's into the discussion as if you make let's say you make a referral to your Board of Selectmen or something, I would say that would be an argument that we could put some numbers on.
Okay.
But in terms of managing particular focus on Crystal Lake, I wouldn't want to get it, I guess, as Betsy was saying, too diffuse and in terms of what you're trying to strive for.
I hear you and I agree, but I think this committee does need to make a recommendation to the select board. And I think it would be extremely helpful if some numbers could accompany that recommendation so that they can look a little beyond. Not that Crystal Lake standing on its own isn't important, it's hugely important, but that there are some additional benefits to this.
Judith, I agree with you on that. And I mean, obviously, I know what Ed's saying and I agree with that, but I don't think that it is so hard to do a first order calculation. We have good data on the nitrogen concentrations in Crystal Lake. We know the water turnover, we know where it goes, and we know how much comes from the watershed. And maybe it's not 100%.
I thought we already did that, Brian, but.
Yeah, well, but the trick would be to say, all right, if you sewer these 18 homes, then what is the reduction in Lonnie's? Because the town needs that for their watershed permit number.
And Pilgrim too. So we've got two
Too,
ponds
yeah.
that would be reducing if we're consistent with sewering.
If that takes care of the additional nitrogen that needs to come out of Lonnie's, I mean, how fabulous is that? That one
Yep.
It'll be part
remediation.
of it. It will help, but it's not going to be a huge amount, but it'll help. And
Okay.
I don't think that's too bad if it's a quick calculation. If it's going to be a big exercise, well, then
It's already in the report, Brian. So I think we just need to find it and call it out. So
Throw
I
in
think
Pilgrim and you've got it nailed.
I think Pilgrim
Throw
has
in
that same
Uncle Harvey's
calculation. So
pond.
I think we're all set.
No, yeah.
I did see briefly Sue Messenger's hand up, but now it's gone. It's back. Sue?
This may not be appropriate for this group, but first let me say this has been great. We're one of the yellow properties on the picture, and one of the green, actually. If things get sewered, which my bias is to support sewering, even though we just paid $1 gazillion to put in a septic system, because I think the long-term kicking the can down the road has been sort of the practice in the town, and things just get more expensive. I don't think this is going to get cheaper. But if the road is sewered, does that mean the property owners might add density to what's on their property?
Depending on what your zoning regulations are, that is a possibility. If the zoning regulations say, for example, in some towns, you're limited to uh, 440 gallons of Title V flow, which is essentially 4 bedrooms per acre, then you're all set, and that's the limitation. So whatever the size of your property is, that's the number of bedrooms that you get, even though the sewer runs down there. If that is not currently in your zoning regulations, then yes, the possibility is if you have a sewer line running down, you could have increases in density.
Okay.
We have nitrogen control regulations as part of Board of Health, and I believe that I know it is limited to 4 bedrooms per acre. I believe, but I'm not positive, that if your property is sewered, you may add 1 bedroom.
As it happens, my husband's on the Board of Health, so maybe I'll just ask him. Thank you.
Ooh. It's a great question though, Sue, and I thank you. Anyone else have questions for the presenters?
I just have a question, being the
Oh,
rookie
okay.
on the
Right.
group. So these reports that we have, they're designed to be scientific reports. So are they designed to also reflect the view or of the collective view of this committee? It seemed like there was some interest in pushing some of this toward a different direction, or toward this, I think it's the same direction, but my point is, we should just leave this the way it is. We can, make recommendations to make things more clear, but their recommendations, meaning Ed, et cetera, are what they are. And then our goal is to produce a recommendation report that's very clear, that says what we think. So I would just caution, just seems to me that I went back and looked at the first part of the report and the end of the report. And to me, it's basically a scientific study, right, of what's going on with scientific recommendations based on what's in the report. So adding emphasis to one part or another, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do here. I think I understood what Ed was saying. He said, yeah, we can certainly lean it toward that, I think, because in fact, the viewpoints are the same. But I'm not sure we should be, influencing these reports at that point. But you guys have been on this a longer period of time. I think the end is what we write up. Should take this information plus the discussion we've had, which was fantastic today, and then come out with very strong recommendations there. And that becomes a document of record where then we fall back on this report.
It's
Again,
never
this-
been that way before. They always go back to the original scientific report. And if it's not in there,
Well, I think everything should be in there. I just don't know if the emphasis should be based on what they believe from the scientific data.
If I could just clarify,
Yeah.
what I was suggesting is that our recommendations are what our recommendations are. I was suggesting, however, that the committee, if they have their own recommendations, that we
Right.
could include that in this report as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Ed.
Yeah, so then my question is, Ed, that's okay to do, as long as
Yeah.
it's called out? Because what if the recommendation, well, let's say you now produce this report, and in theory, do we review this report before you finalize it? Let's say now you add something to this, and I don't know that we're going to see the track changes on this as a committee. You add some comments that are in here. Do we see this ahead of time to make sure we're okay with that, so that we've been quoted properly? It just didn't seem like maybe this is the right place for that. This report.
Let me
I think typically what we try to do is if there are comments or requested clarifications or anything like that, we try to put those into the report. I think it is helpful in a lot of cases to get the feedback from the committee into the report as well, in terms of what their recommendations are. It's not tremendously expansive in terms of what I'm talking about. But I think sometimes when someone later picks up a document and wants to figure out where a committee was at that point, when they were presented with this information, what they decided, I think that sometimes is useful to have in one document.
But
Okay,
that.
rather than them going back and looking at our meeting notes.
Right, exactly.
But that part is like an addendum or is clearly ascribed to the committee. The report itself, we are agnostic of
Right.
which solution you pick. It's not our job to say
Correct.
the one. We say these are the bunch and these are how you would make a judgment, but it's the town's judgment. And all of this stuff we've done over 20, 30 years, 40 years now, we do not say do this. That is the town's job. The
Right.
town pays for it. The committee represents the town. But we can put stuff in if we ascribe it to you.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian, for clarifying that also.
I put my
Yeah, we never alter or ask a consultant to alter the scientific findings. Those are what they
No.
are.
No, I didn't get that impression either. I wasn't saying that. I'm just saying, if you start saying, well, we're kind of leaning in this direction or not. We haven't even come to the point of having the meeting and saying this is where we're going to be heading. It seems like it was a little premature to, put certain things. I agree absolutely that we should be having input in here and saying, you know what, maybe you kind of missed this particular bullet. It's sort of hidden there. And we think that should be accentuated. And certainly if they agree that that's the case, then that should go in. I didn't know if there are going to be recommendations in this at the end that say the committee recommends this, because we haven't had the discussion. I don't know when this is going to be done, but is it going to, will you finalize this report prior to us meeting in January? I kind of doubt it.
I was sort of taking the lead from where the committee wanted to go. I mean, if the committee, what we're hoping to get to is we're hoping to get to a final set of comments back that if we need to adjust or edit what we've got in terms of the draft, that we can get to a final. Hopefully, in most cases for other lake management plans, that is usually involved the committee making a recommendation about what their preferred options are. And it would probably be like a sentence or two paragraph that would say, the committee considered this on this date, decided that this is their preferred set of options that they would like to recommend. Nothing
so that would mean
particular
that
big, but that's
so
sort of
we'd end up waiting. So we'd end up waiting till after we have our meeting in January, I would assume, to finalize this report then.
Yeah, we'll discuss this at our next meeting, which I believe will have to be a week earlier than our normal meeting due to the observed town holiday in January. So I believe that, what is that, the 11th of January, the Monday before? I better look at my calendar quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, the 11th. I believe maybe Sarah can check. I know town clerk put us in January for the date. I don't know if she's listening right now, but I think we're scheduled for the 11th instead of the 18th because of the.
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm gonna go check the town calendar.
Yeah, I believe it's Martin Luther King birthday or something. It's an observed holiday by the town, so we can't meet on our scheduled date.
Yeah, you're correct on that.
Okay, so it will be the 11th, so it comes up pretty quick. And we'll discuss, hopefully we can put together.
You're muted, Judy, I think.
Judy, you're gone.
We lost her.
Yeah, we did.
wow.
Well,
Austin,
Judy, you're in and
Hello?
out.
We're back.
I'm sorry.
You went in and out.
Yeah, unfortunately, a phone call came in the middle of my talking. I apologize. Am
I
I
have
still?
my hand up. Can I make one statement?
Yes, you may.
Okay, the role of our committee is to assure the water quality of the town of Orleans. So we have received a scientist's recommendation. We have reviewed them. And I think it's very important that we make clear if sewering is our top option for anyone of a number of reasons, I do think that should be part of the report. But I also urge all of you, we need to set aside enough time at that January meeting to resolve these issues. Speed is of the essence. If they have to decide on the design for Meeting House Pond sewering for the Maytown meeting, Judith will probably tell me how many months back you got to go to have the document ready to move forward. So we're on it. We're in the crunch period.
I do
Right.
believe they're already looking into it, which is a good thing, but
Yep.
I agree with you, Betsy. It's all due haste to make an official recommendation and a strong one, and hopefully backed up with some numbers and dollars. Money.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Excellent presentation, Ed and Brian, and I thank you very much for putting this together and presenting to us today. You are welcome to stick around for a few extra minutes for the next item on the agenda, which is a brief update on Uncle Harvey's Pond. Our another consultant, Scott Fisher, is here, and I have asked him to please just do a quick update for us on the status of the notice of intent. So if we're all done with Crystal Lake temporarily, I'll move on to the next item. Scott, I guess we're ready for you.
right, thank
Judy, first I have to officially
Oh, that's right.
recuse
Betsy.
myself from participation in this segment.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. I keep forgetting about your situation. All right, Betsy's recused for discussion of Uncle Harvey's Pond. So go ahead, Scott.
All right, well, we have received, just a quick update, we've received the signature from the town for the notice of intent form. So we're ready to move forward with the application. We had a draft NOI that was ready to be finalized. We submitted that for review. Some commentation came back, which were all very good comments and feedback. The most important of which is that several of the properties have now changed hands since the original filing and drafting of that notice of intent. If you remember, we had drafted the original draft a while back, and some of the properties have changed hands. So we need to roll this back a tiny bit. We're hoping to not add more time, undue time to this process than we need to. We're looking to file this formally with the town on December 30th, which will put us in line, let me find my notes, for the January 19th hearing. So that is our intent. We have direction from the town as to how to move forward. We just need to send the new affidavits out to new property owners, make sure we have those signed by the new owners, and to confirm that our treatment methodology, layout, approach, and properties as we've configured it in the notice of intent is still going to be applicable, given whether or not we receive permission from those new property owners to move forward with the alum notice of intent application. So that's basically where we're at right now. So there might be some more modification to the figures and to the submittal based on what we hear back from the new property owners, but we are in very good position. And I've been saying that for a while now. We're in very good position to actually file that notice of intent before the new year reaches us, and we'll be on that hearing on the 19th. That is our plan right now.
And Scott, I have seen those two affidavits for the new property owners. The prior property owners had also signed affidavits with approval. And I do know the town is in possession of the two, the latest one. So I believe that's 12 out of 15, if I'm counting correctly. So
that's correct. And that's where we were at before, just so everyone knows, it's the
Yep.
same number. We just need the new information. We have a new assessor's map. All of that needs to be included. So it needs to be current. So that's why we're in good position to still meet that filing date of the 30th. All of this information came to us in the middle of the day on Friday of last week, which was the due date for the next coming hearing. So we missed that window, but I feel very certain that we will hit this next window.
Okay, thank you very much for the update. Any questions from the committee regarding what Scott just said? Okay, any questions from the audience regarding this? All right. I thank you again, Scott, for hanging in there for both, and you're welcome to stick around. It's, I believe the next item is the Dredge Advisory Committee. Quick update from Betsy Fertney, if Betsy Fertney wants to rejoin the committee at this point.
Yes, rejoining the committee. Unfortunately, our chairman forgot to post our December 14th meeting, and therefore it had to be canceled. So it is in process of being rescheduled for either January 11th or January 13th. I haven't heard a final date yet, but the only updated information from the Woods Hole group was some additional potential disposal parcels being identified in Pleasant Bay. But other than that, there's been no other information because we didn't have a meeting.
When is the next scheduled meeting?
It's not scheduled yet. They have proposed either the 11th of January or the 13th. And I have not heard yet which date they were picking, but this is a really important meeting because the Woods Hole group will be present. I have asked for some very specific recalculations. The chairman has asked for some recalculations. So basically they're trying to create a model that's very flexible. If this happens, this is in. If this happens, it's out. So they're trying to make a very responsive model that when we actually have some final data on volumes and participation and so on and so forth, that we can quickly do an analysis of what kind of dollars are involved.
Okay, I thank you very much for that update, Betsy. And okay, the last item before public comment was the approval of the meeting minutes. I want to thank Rich for getting me the draft minutes in a timely manner. I, however, failed to get it turned around and backed out to you in a timely manner. So I will ask your indulgence in dealing with approval of these minutes when I send them to you for the next meeting. Again, my apologies. Are there any public comments out there or announcements from the
Judy,
committee? Yeah.
this
Walter.
is Walter. Sorry. I
Hi,
want to
Walter.
thank you all for the getting this report to the stage where it's at and the other work on the other impaired ponds. So we now have 3 reports on 3 ponds. I really encourage you to think about how you're going to educate the public about the findings of the impairment and the need for action, in addition to being able to make a timely recommendation to the select board so that they can make sure that we have some movement forward at next spring's town meeting. Thank you.
Very good comment, and I thank you, Walter. Anyone else for any future items for future agendas? I know we have a priority item at our next meeting for the Crystal Lake report. Anything else? I know another important thing that we need to deal with is we need to already talk about next season's estuary monitoring and getting the people that we need. And I know I'm going to need help because it's a busy time of year for me with herring count and also our farm. So I am going to need help from the committee to coordinate the estuary sampling moving forward, as well as the PALS pond sampling. So that probably will also be on the agenda, but we have a pretty full agenda each time now. So until we can get these management plans moved through, and so I thank you in advance for everyone pitching in and helping me out here. Any other comments?
Merry
Well,
Christmas.
yeah, I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday, and I thank you all for your reviews and comments and great questions today. It was really good.
Move we adjourn.
Do I have
Second.
a second? All those in favor? And we need to do this by verbal vote.
Judith,
Rich,
I.
aye.
Ed, I.
Earl, I.
Betsy?
Betsy, aye.
Judy Scanlon, aye. All right, thank you. And again, happy holidays.
You too,
You
everybody.
too.
And thank you,
Bye.
Sarah, very much. for
Bye-bye.